Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media. Welcome to this press briefing. At the head table, we have, on my immediate left, the distinguished Prime Minister of Dominica, the Honorable Roosevelt Skerrit. On his left, we have the President of the Territorial Council of Martinique, President Marie-Jean. And on my right, the Director General of the OECS, Dr. Didicus Jules. And we also have the BVI, I'm so sorry, my dear friend and colleague, the Premier of the British Virgin Islands, and Andrew Foyer. We had a very successful 67th meeting of the OECS Authority, following on the heels of a very successful OECS assembly meeting yesterday. The OECS heads of government and their representatives deliberated extensively on matters of foreign affairs and joint representation. Received a report on the mission to Morocco, which is progressing and should be opened in the coming weeks. And that mission will be headed by a Kittian, and we have an Antiguan who will serve as the first officer and a St. Lucian as the second officer. There are continued discussions of strategic representation on the African continent, mandated a doubling of efforts to advance the establishment of a permanent mission in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, the seat of the African Union. And we have an Antiguan who we have nominated to serve in that capacity as the OECS ambassador to the African Union. The authority considered a suggestion by the Territorial Authority of Martinique to deepen diplomatic cooperation between the representatives of Martinique, Guadeloupe, and St. Martin in Brussels with the OECS Overseas Mission in Brussels with a view to share the workload of the mission. We also held advanced discussions on joint diplomatic representation in Ottawa, Canada, and we're hoping that very shortly we should be able to establish that joint mission. We received a presentation on the Eastern Caribbean Liaison Service, ECLS, and the first meeting of the OECS Council of Ministers for Labor. And there was a recommendation to diversify the search for new opportunities with a strategic plan to address those emerging opportunities for youth. So rather than concentrating exclusively on the agricultural sector, we have asked the ECLS to look at other opportunities for employment for OECS nationals. Now, Antigua and Barbuda traditionally has not participated in this program, but we have signaled our intention to avail Antiguans and Barbudans of the opportunity to become involved in this program, the ECLS program, and that is the temporary employment program in Canada, which you have a number of OECS, practically all of the OECS member states are participating, with the exception of Antigua and Barbuda. And we believe that the participation would not only help in terms of earnings, but there would be a transfer of technology, especially within the agricultural sector. And perhaps too, it will give us eventually a larger cadre of agricultural entrepreneurs in order to develop our domestic industry in Antigua and certainly within the wider OECS sub-region. In fact, I'm told that in the other countries already, a number of those workers have returned and that they are now getting involved in a significant amount of agricultural production. The authority received an update from the Chief Justice on the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court, and we have committed to assist the court in strengthening its capacity, especially insofar as IT is concerned, to digitize the records and to assist with the recording of judgments on a timely basis. And even the issue of remuneration was looked at, and consideration has been given to a request to increase their remuneration. Heads of government and their representatives also received an update on the recently held collaborative meeting with the OECS, the CIP, that is the Citizenship by Investment Program, or CBI program, and the Joint Regional Communication Center, the JRCC, with the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank Governor and the Director General of the OECS. It was recommended that the JRCC, the Commission, and the Central Bank serve as oversight, or serve on an oversight committee to continue to audit the operations of these programs and to make recommendations for the improvements. Also noted the need to move with greater sense of speed towards standardization or harmonization of these programs. The meeting also further considered uniformed legislation to include uniformed application forms and due diligence forms, which will help in counteracting misplaced views and interactions. There was also a recommendation for the creation of a pool of funding from CIP, CBI member states that will facilitate hiring a focal point station at the communications unit of the Commission to deal with CPI, CBI, media-related matters. The authority also considered and approved the questions proposed for submission to the court for an opinion, and that is dealing with the issue of the authority of legislation that is passed in the OECS Assembly, and certain legislation that is actually devised by the authority to determine whether or not they have immediate legal effect on the national at a national level. So we have filed a constitutional question in order to determine whether or not the authority has that level of authority in inverted commas. Now, the authority also received and approved the 2019-2020 work program and the budget for the OECS Commission. And we pretty much approved the work program, and for the most part, the budget, with the exception of one item that has to be considered by a subsequent meeting of the heads. The meeting also received reports from the Council of Ministers on matters of education, health, foreign affairs, environmental sustainability, and tourism. In essence, it was a successful meeting in which we were able to dispense of a number of issues of the authority in a very efficacious manner. And we have a meeting set for later this year, possibly November of this year, to follow up on the various decisions that were taken by the authority. So I will now ask my colleagues, to include the Director General, if they wish to add any further comments. If not, we can just ask the media to proceed with their questions or their interventions.
Chair, what I would like to add is the deep appreciation of the Commission for the hospitality and attention paid to this meeting and the arrangements, excellent arrangements made for the Assembly as well as the Commission, the authority meeting by the government and people of Antigua and Barbuda. We're deeply appreciative of these arrangements, and I must say that this Assembly has been a real high point in the life of the Assembly. Some very significant accomplishments. We saw an unprecedented number of persons following, and I'll leave that to the PM to reveal those figures. But coming out of that, a lot of the suggestions made by our new chairman, Prime Minister Brown, with respect to the approach that we need to take for on the matters of de-risking and the issues on the European front will be taken up by the Commission. So we have a very robust strategy going forward on the diplomatic front. Thank you.
I also want to commend my colleague and friend, Prime Minister Brown, Chairman of the Authority, for the excellent manner in which he conducted the affairs of the Authority today. I felt it was in my mind, I've been to many such meetings, and today was very constructive and very focused on arriving at solutions to challenges. So I want to commend our chairman for this. I think 2 points I want to raise quickly. One is that we have, at the authority, signaled our intention of the establishment of a trust fund for the Supreme Court. in order to allow for there to be the financing of the court, similar to what we have done in respect to the Caribbean Court of Justice. So we've asked for a simplified approach to this in terms of reporting back to us, to look at what are the needs of the Supreme Court and what would be the financing required to finance the court, certainly in the medium to long term. Because we have given a firm commitment to the courts to ensure that it has the resources at its disposal to dispense of justice within our Supreme Court jurisdiction. Also, in respect to the CIP, CBI, in addition to agreeing on moving with uniform legislation, uniform application forms, the setting up of the oversight committee, which will assist in auditing our program, reviewing our program from time to time, and making recommendations on how to continue to strengthen our programs. We have also taken a decision to not only continue CFT training for our staff at the various units, but to get all of the staff within those units to be AML certified, because it's an important component of good governance, especially with financial transactions. So we will be taking the exposure of the units to AML CFT training to being certified, and that will be started almost immediately. We believe that these things will help strengthen the units, and also in large measure dispel a lot of the misplaced criticisms of the programs in the region, which I believe have been very robust in our approach, in the way we conduct the affairs in these units, and the respect which we have for the due diligence processes, which we all have heavily entrenched in our programs. So I want to again thank the government and people of Antigua, and specifically the Prime Minister for his leadership, and I have no doubt that the OECS would be in a very solid hands for the next year. And as you know, Prime Minister Brown has been a very firm, very resolute, and very decisive and principled voice on many regional and international issues. And I think the region is better off with people like Gaston Brown leading our countries, because in this world we really need principled, forthright, transparent governments and leaders in particular. And I'm not saying so, one, because he's my president, neither I am saying so because he's my friend. I am saying these things because they're the truth. And we have seen him and his positions in very important matters. And had it not been for such reasoned voices like Gaston Brown, I believe the region would be in a more difficult situation, and the hemisphere itself, on a number of issues which I did not want to belabor here, because we all know a number of those points. So thank you very much.
I cannot leave without expressing my gratitude to Prime Minister Brown for his hospitality that he has extended to all of us in the authority. This meeting was a timely one. I want to say that he has my 100% support from the BVI, because the ideas that I've heard coming forward from him, not just now, but for quite a while, especially in terms of LIAT and the de-risking, and even with the banks, shows me that he is a person that thinks similar to myself in terms of being an unconventional in the region, not just for Antigua and Barbuda, but also the entire region. And although we all will have our own areas of challenges in our specific small island states, it's very important that we continue to strengthen this union. I've been saying for a few years now that the Caribbean is going to be one of the next economic powers in the world. And I said in the meetings that we're not short of the manpower, contrary to what persons say. We're not short of the expertise, contrary to what some may believe. And we're not short of most of the things that persons say that we are short of. What we are short of is a unity. And this meeting has showed me that we have not changed, but we rather transforming. Because a caterpillar, doesn't change into a butterfly, it transforms, which means that it can't go back. And the level in which Prime Minister Brown has brought the meeting already has told me that he's the transformational agent for the OECS at this time. So I congratulate him, the people of Antigua and Barbuda. I also congratulate Dr. Didicus, who I have a lot of admiration for and respect, and the entire authority. And the BVI will continue to do what it can and to make sure that we forward the cause of the OECS to make sure that we harmonize the unity that will make us an economic power in the region and in the world.
Thank you very much, Premier. And let me state here that those kind remarks were unsolicited and unrehearsed. Anyway, let me ask President Marie-Jean to say a few words.
Il est difficile de s'exprimer après mes collègues, mais je dois dire que l'accueil a été à la hauteur de ce que nous espérions. Qu'ils en soient tous remerciés. Mais deuxièmement, il faut savoir que l'OECS a pris sa vitesse de croisière. Cela veut dire non seulement elle aborde tous les sujets d'actualité, mais deuxièmement, c'est que depuis quelque temps, on l'a rappelé, de façon sous-entendue, nous sommes sollicités par énormément nos voisins, mais le Canada, la Chine, et même la Chine, et d'autres pays qui veulent travailler avec nous. Donc tout le problème, c'est de pouvoir, comment dirais-je, ne rejeter personne, tout en ne nous dénaturons pas non plus. Je tenais à le dire très objectivement et je remercie tous les collègues, je ne prends pas la peine de les nommer, pour ce travail qui a été accompli. Et je suis à côté d'eux dès le départ. Et je pense comme eux que la Caraïbe, que j'ai appelé d'ailleurs le 6e continent, va davantage se développer et que les regards, et beaucoup de regards, se tournent vers nous. Donc c'est bon signe que par conséquent, il faut travailler dans ce sens pour que se consolide davantage encore l'OECS.
We're going to get
Je dois dire que... Oh, sorry. I'm getting tired. I have to say that I'm quite happy about all that has been performed, and I have to say thank you, because in the difficult situation that we've been living, still we managed to get through and above. So I want to thank everybody for everything that has been said here in these meetings. Second, I want to say that now the OECS is getting into its regular speedway, cruising now, and on various topical subjects. This is all the more so that nations of all sizes are now requesting to become close or even part of us if they could. Even nations like Canada, China, everybody wants to work with us. So it means that it is a good thing that we've been working well. Now there's an issue. We cannot accommodate everybody, but how to say no, but without losing our partners is something that we'll have to elaborate together. I want to thank, therefore, all my colleagues for the work that has been accomplished so far. You know that the Caribbean are going ahead. As I've always said, we are the sixth continent. We will develop further, that's for sure. Eyes are upon us, and absolutely we shall show them that we will move ahead and go ahead, and this righteously and with great success.
Thank you again, Comrade Marijan. And you're right, we are the sixth continent, and certainly we shall advance. We'll now open the floor for the distinguished gentlemen and ladies of the media.
Good afternoon, Prime Ministers, and in the case of the BVI Premier, as well as Dr. Jules. Prime Minister Brown, in terms of the temporary work program for Antigua and Barbuda that you've signaled that Antigua and Barbuda will now be involved in, could you say why it was not involved in it up to now, and what are the modalities to ensure that it benefits and the timeline for that?
Well, in that case, you'll be asking me to speak for previous administrations. So I can't speak for previous governments, but what I do know is that having recognized that that program is a significant program that contributes about $30 million approximately in salaries and wages to the sub-region, and a program that employs almost 900 individuals, I felt that it will be a good opportunity for Antiguans and Barbudans. Well, most of you know that we have a difficulty getting people involved in agriculture as entrepreneurs or in a very serious way. But you'll find sometimes that, our people not prepared to do certain work in Antigua, but they will go to North America and do the same work that they refuse to do at home. So perhaps it will be a process of acculturization to get more people involved in that agricultural space, because we have a fundamental problem in Antigua and Barbuda. We produce little. In fact, about 90% of what we consume is actually imported. And it means, therefore, that we're very vulnerable. And my government is seeking to ensure some level of food sovereignty, and at the same time to ensure that we have some food security. So we need to produce more. And we can also benefit from the skills that they will learn abroad. There will be a transfer of technology. I'm hoping that as we participate in this program, we'll see a number of them returning home to establish their own farms and to bring new technology in order to ensure that we have productive and sustainable farms.
I'd like to add to what the PM has said, because in fact, the participation of Antigua and Barbuda, although now becoming public, didn't just start. It goes back several months since the beginning of the year, when your Labour Commissioner, well, first of all, Minister Benjamin has been part of the ministerial discussions around the expansion of the ECLS. And the Labour Commissioner of Antigua and Barbuda is part of a working group within the OECS that has been working carefully to shape it. As PM Brown indicated, there has been a problem with, in the past, the program focusing largely on manual agricultural work. But increasingly, it has become more sophisticated with greenhouse technologies, hydroponics, and so on. And with the cannabis industry, we are now looking, there's a particular cannabis operation that I was told looks very much like a nuclear laboratory, because it's all sanitized and so on for the production of cannabis oil. And we have 100 workers who are going up to work on that particular operation. What has happened too is that 2 of the long-serving workers from Dominica who worked in hydroponics operations, having done several iterations in Canada, are now retired because they've been able to build their houses, pay off their mortgages, and are now looking at setting up hydroponics operations in Dominica. So that's the reference PM made to the transfer of technology. We're also looking at the expansion of the program to include other service areas like care of the elderly, care of babysitting, and so on. And as you know, these are areas where Caribbean people tend to go illegally to work. Now we're hoping we can change that paradigm to allow for legal opportunities that can even perhaps open pathways for second citizenship if they wish.
One more question, Prime Minister. For this one is for yourself and Prime Minister Skerritt as well Premier Fahey. In terms of you'd recommended yesterday at the OECS Assembly that the OECS should purchase the assets, the operations of Scotiabank, which are up for sale. And it would be a bank of about $2 billion in assets, which would have greater leverage for possibly correspondent banking, attracting correspondent banking relations. Was there any discussion on that today? Do you have any sort of buy-in from your fellow heads? I'd also want to get PM Roosevelt Skerritt as well as Mr. Fahey on that, as well as the Liat situation. Is there any further consensus on that? Thanks.
Yeah, well, the issue of Scotiabank is an issue that we intend to raise at the Monetary Council at the next meeting of the Monetary Council, and to try and get a consensus within the OECS as to whether or not we should conjoin and purchase the branches of Scotia. I would have outlined the opportunities by so doing. So I do not need to necessarily repeat that. Insofar as Liat is concerned, we're having discussions with other potential participants. In fact, I believe that immediately after this press conference, we'll be speaking to our dear friend, the Premier of the BVI, and we have others who we're having discussions with. As you know, Dominica is already a shareholder, and what we're trying to do here is to broaden the participation in Liat, so that Liat would function as a truly regional institution, not to be dominated by any one country. In fact, we're in a situation now in which we have offered to take over, if not all, the significant majority of the debts of Barbados. And it's not a share grab on the part of Antigua and Barbuda. It's a situation in which Barbados indicated that they're in an IMF program and that they are unable to carry the debt at the Caribbean Development Bank. Now, if we allowed Barbados' proposal to proceed, in which we sell the planes and pay down or pay off those debts, then it will place Liat in an even more precarious position, because Liat would then have to lease 3 additional planes at a cost of about $500,000 a month, or alternatively downsize, and there's no such thing as a shrinking successful institution. I mean, Liat has had problems serving the region with 10 planes, and if they had to downsize to 7, clearly it will create a fundamental problem. So we then decided to hold discussions with the government of Barbados to acquire their shares, with the understanding that we will then divest those shares to other governments. I mean, the Prime Minister of Dominica may well agree to take an increased stake, and maybe St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So we are having those discussions, and in due course, we will notify the public.
Well, in respect to Scotiabank and the sale of Scotiabank, the process is not completed yet, because up to this moment, Scotiabank has not gotten back to the respective governments in respect to the final approvals required for this acquisition to be consummated. And as the Prime Minister indicated, we'll have a more in-depth and focused discussion on this matter at the Monetary Council, where it is better placed as opposed to the OECS authority. But we are keen to discuss this matter. Obviously, our interest is to ensure in all actions taken by various stakeholders or governments themselves, that we always want to ensure that the best interests, first and foremost, of our citizens and residents are protected, and therefore we will need to have a role to play in assuring that this is protected at all reasonable cost. So I'm hoping that citizens appreciate when statements are made. There is no opposition to private transactions or the free economy. It is ensuring that the interests of our citizens, the interests of our countries, are assured and are protected, because that is a fundamental responsibility of a government. And one must not allow internecine political ramblings in our countries to set aside that very lofty responsibility, sacred responsibility of a government. And if a government were to shirk on that responsibility, The question is, how would you define that government? So we will have further discussions at the Monetary Council on this issue. With regards to Liat, you know my position on this. I believe firmly that Liat has a very important role to play in the region. Like every other institution, organization, it has its own challenges, but we cannot preoccupy ourselves only with challenges and not look at the benefit and the implications for our region if Liat were to cease operations. Yes, we can maybe get from Antigua to the UK, but if you want to go to Barbados, are you going to go to the UK and then go to Barbados? You know, if you have to transact business. And in many of these countries, you have regional institutions resident in a particular country, and which citizens, ordinary average citizens, will need to travel between these islands to get to these regional institutions and international institutions. So the role that Liat plays is very important, and Dominica will continue to be a shareholder, and we are not opposed at all. As a matter of fact, I would say in a positive, we are in support of Dominica playing an even bigger role in Liat. Liat is too important for us not to do whatever we have to do as governments and countries and institutions. I also believe too that the Caribbean Hotel Association, the people who are one of the major beneficiaries of Liat, need to step up, and as a consortium, how much can you invest? I mean, as small as it is, it will go a long way in assisting Liat in its sustainability and its sustenance. And therefore, if we're going to talk about the region and regional integration and economic prosperity for the region and job creation, this region, as small as our population is, I'm talking about the region, 600,000 people. This region has made many people rich from the sweat and the toil of our citizens. I mean, we have made people millionaires, and I dare say even billionaires in the region. And if we have a particular serious challenge, are we just going to sit by and not play our part? Are we not going to play our part in seeking to place Liat in a position where it can continue to operate and even increase its operations? Complaining and criticizing is not going to solve problems. If complaining and criticism were solving problems, we would have had no problems in the Caribbean, none whatsoever in the OECS. These countries will be booming. Zero unemployment. You would even have reserves, national reserves. Not only in the central bank, but national reserves. So we have to look at things in a very pragmatic way, and not in a pessimistic way. And I am a strong supporter of Liat, and as difficult as things may be for our country, reconstructing and rebuilding after a hurricane, that is part of our survival, and a very critical part of our survival. And in Dominica's case, we have about 6 or so hotels under construction, many of which will be completed this year. And we have to ensure that we can bring in people to these resorts, to these hotels, and to our country. And Liat, you cannot remove Liat from the equation. So I think once Antigua would have settled these negotiations with Barbados, Dominica would like to engage in a discussion on how do we go forward in respect to the further apportioning of shares in Liat. And I also believe too that my regional colleagues, I have recognized a couple have played a part, but we need to go beyond that as well, and to consolidate their participation. But it is not enough to just say, well, Liat is this, Liat is that, and therefore, and come to the table. If you're not around the table, it's going to be very difficult for you to influence the decisions. And so if you're party to negotiations, if you're party to something, then the ideas that you have, the ideas which you have, can very well find themselves turning into decisions and actions. But this hackneyed complaints about Liat and Liat this and that, that's not going to solve a problem. We just have to close our eyes for a few seconds and appreciate the impact on the way of life of ordinary citizens and businesses in this region if Liat were to cease its operations. Liat, even when the planes are delayed, it has an economic impact. And if you have terrible weather or a plane is down and Liat doesn't fly for a couple of hours, we have a problem in the region. The fact is, this airline business in a small jurisdiction, small airspace is very difficult. And even in the United States with American Airlines and all of these huge airline companies, I mean, you go and do your research and find out how many times American Airlines has filed for bankruptcy. You think they filed for bankruptcy because it's a fashion? No, the airline business, as far as I've been told, and as far as I read, is a very, very difficult enterprise. And, you fly Dominica and take off 40 minutes, you have to stop. The plane has to land. From Dominica to Barbados, 45 minutes. This up and down of a plane, it's just like a motor vehicle. If you have to keep mashing the brakes every 2 feet, what's going to happen to your vehicle? Especially if you have this manual, you mess up your gearbox and your clutch and your brakes. You'll have to spend a lot of money for maintenance, rather than if you're driving on a long straight road and not even able to tap the brakes for once. So let us always reduce things to our own personal business and family experiences and appreciate the challenge which others have, and in this case, Liat. And I think that the regional private sector needs to join forces with the governments, and all of us in the region need to join forces. I mean, back in the days with in Jamaica wasn't a beneficiary of Liat flying in the air, but they participated. They were shareholders because the Prime Minister at the time, the progressive Prime Minister at the time, recognized that it was good for regional integration, and therefore they felt that they had a wider obligation beyond just their own narrow benefit or non-benefit of Liat, and they participated. And you tell me that we're benefiting and we don't want to participate? How does one explain that to our children? And how do we explain to our school children and to our young people? What kind of attitudes we are passing on to them if we are so indifferent to that which benefits all of us? And I think, we have to elevate the conversation, we have to elevate the discussion, and to look at things in a very, very, very pragmatic manner. And I think there's just too much pessimism in this region, and then we complain about unemployment, we complain about this, we complain about that. We are the cause of it in the region, because our discussions are always wrapped around internecine, parochial party discussions, and not about national and regional endeavors. What are the issues confronting the region, and how can we work together to addressing them? And of course with these talk shows, and that's where people get the education now, and also falsehoods propagated and mischief and so on, and on Facebook and on the social media, and that is a source of education. And you are bright people who will spend all of the taxpayers' money and their own studying at various universities, engaging themselves in futile discussions that are not going to make anybody better, or any country better, or any business better. And so that we are misplacing the knowledge and the skills that we've acquired and the wisdom that we have prayed to the good Lord to give to us. To no benefit. So on the issue of Liat and so on, I am a bit disappointed in the way that this thing is discussed when it is up for discussion. And I think we have to look beyond just trying to hear ourselves rather than looking at the issue and how can we work together towards resolving the issue?
Well, well, thank you for asking me also. One of the problems that I've always realized in life is nobody check the weight of the elephant till it gets on their foot. And the problem with LIAT is that some smaller than states in the Caribbean won't have as great an impact with LIAT, so they don't pay attention. And as the Prime Minister of Dominica rightfully said, some with some of the experience decide to throw the baby out with the bad water. But there are a few ways that you fix things. You could fix something by stopping what's happening now and fix it. Or you can fix things by have what's happening now and fixing while you're happening. With LIAT, I see it's a combination of both. But first, you have to know where you are, which is what Prime Minister Brown is saying. There's know where LIAT is. He's doing up a package, and I respect him for that, to know where we are, because even in the GPS system in a car when you rent it, its reference point, if you get lost, is based on where you set it from. So here now, our reference point with LIAT will be based on where we are. And how do we recalibrate our thinking in an unconventional way now to make sure the mistakes of the past do not happen again? And when I listened to Prime Minister Brown, I realized that that's the direction that he is going. And when I say that you could stop things and fix it, can you imagine, as Prime Minister Scared rightfully said, if we decide now that we believe everything we heard with LIAT, we want to take it out on LIAT and just stop LIAT from flying now and say, that's it. It is scary, but can you imagine right now if LIAT stopped flying in the region? That means that none of us here on this table, except for Prime Minister Brown, will get home when this meeting is over, and there'll be a lot of stranded persons. But I agree with the idea that the Caribbean Hotel Association too have to come together. We have a way in the Caribbean enjoying things, but never, investing in it and things that is going to appear. At times in church, some people get angry when the pastor says, pass some little money. But while, you shouldn't peddle the gospel, you will have people there sitting down and enjoy church all day, all week, and not even putting a dollar unless you force them. So they have to understand that it takes money to run things, and it takes ideas to help the money to make more money. So now when you bring all the region together and we sit down, those who could afford to put in whatever amount will do so. One of the things I told the authority, which I commended Prime Minister Brown for, is the little booklet he wrote on de-risking in the banks. I found that so informative. He broke it down into what we'll call small man language. And one of the failures of OECS in the past that I've recognized that I've said that we have to improve upon, because it's all of us, is to make sure that we disseminate the information here and the work that we're doing here to a level that it's not tax money. These are the things that you hear. And while we would blame some of them for that, also some has been leadership errors in that we now have to be more explicit in why we are doing what we're doing, because we're doing it not for just present generation, but for future generation, to keep the unity. And that's the key here with LIAT. LIAT is one of those entities that it is all of our business. So I'm really aboard with whatever that we can do. We're still dealing with the recovery, but whatever we can do piece by piece to help with the maintain LIAT, then we have to make sure that we do that. And the Prime Minister Dominica said it so correctly. There's hardly any airline existing that either didn't file for bankruptcy or had to merge. Very few of them. And even if they didn't merge, they had to cut back. But in America, in those bigger areas, when they cut back, you have many options. In the Caribbean, most places, you have no other option. So LIAT is very important. And one thing we can say about LIAT, like LIAT or hate LIAT, we all still love LIAT. We love its safety record. We love Liat even when we have the little jokes about them what go wrong, because Liat has become synonymous with safety. And that's one of the things that people admire with Liat. And Liat has become synonymous with uniting the Caribbean. It really is a Caribbean airline. Liat really is a Caribbean airline. So when you have an entity that has served you so well, and is still the main thread between all of the Caribbean islands, you definitely have to pay attention to it and see how we can bring it together. So I commend Prime Minister Brown for taking up this mantle, and we're going to do all we can to sit down and see how can we put this together, explain it to our territories, and let them to know that divided we're going to fall. It's old vintage, but it's the truth. But united, we definitely will stand. And it's important that we not only stand, but we keep Liat in the air.
Afternoon.
Thank you very much, Premier.
Oh, sorry. This is a question directed at Prime Minister Brown. You recently came back from a visit to Russia and Switzerland, and you revealed to us that there now needs to be a regulatory fee paid over by all countries, including Antigua and Barbuda, a regulatory fee for the CIP program. What is the amount?
No, I'm not too sure.
You're not sure?
No. Well, first of all, I never made any such articulation, but I'm not too sure exactly, what you're hitting at here, what you're trying to get at here.
Oh, the visit that you made.
Well, the visit to Russia was about establishing visa-free
Russian
access between Antigua and Barbuda and the Russian Federation. So that has been established. Antiguans and Barbudans and Russians now can move freely between the two countries. I'm not too sure if you're referring to the trip to Switzerland, in which I was the featured speaker at a forum that was established by the Migration Council. And in that case, there's a subscription that member countries have to pay because they involve in advocacy with the European Union, as well as promotion of the CIP programs within the Caribbean. So perhaps maybe that is what you're referring to. Pleasure. Thank you. It's about $200,000 US, and it has been paid by the CIU unit.
The fourth landed campus is about to come to Antigua and Barbuda, and it is a landmark occasion for the whole region, the OECS. The letter basically authorizing the opening of the campus will be issued by the Chancellor of the UII. When will that letter be issued to Antigua and Barbuda?
I suspect by tomorrow the Chancellor would be notifying the various council members to confirm that the council has now unanimously agreed to the establishment of the fourth landed campus of UE at Five Islands. As indicated, this is intended to be an OECS campus. We have asked Dr. Jules, the Director General, to develop a paper for the OECS for further consideration, perhaps at our next meeting, so that we can look at the structure and to make sure that it is firmly established as a sub-regional institution. The last thing we want is a situation in which it is considered to be exclusively an Antiguan and Barbudan campus. We recognize, though, that on the basis that it is domiciled in Antigua, that we have to carry the lion's share of the expenses, providing the, the physical campus facilities and so on, and we are committed to do so. As you know, we have this new facility at Five Islands at a cost of $25 million US, and we're about to program another tranche from the Chinese to construct additional facilities totaling another $20 million US. Plus, we've been upgrading the other sub-campuses. So for us in Antigua, we know that we have to be the anchor and to spend the necessary monies in order to ensure that we have a successful campus. We also introduced a tax measure, as you know, to make sure that there's reliability in the funding of the campus. And as I indicated during the opening of the session of the Assembly, well, not the Assembly, of the Authority, we also will be proposing that perhaps the countries within the sub-region that have citizenship by investment programs, that maybe they could add a flat fee of 5,000 US, maybe 10,000 US dollars per application to help to raise funding to support the other countries within the sub-region who would like to at least cover the economic costs for the students. In any event, we have asked for a special carve-out from UE to ensure that we do not replicate the bureaucracy that exists in the other campus territories, and that we do not have, excessive costs. We want to make sure that, we have increased enrollments and increased graduations. We want to make sure that the fees are truly affordable in order to increase the accessibility to a university degree, recognizing that we have been left behind for decades. And there's empirical evidence to confirm that the OECS region has been an underserved region. We have one of the lowest levels of enrollment and graduates within this hemisphere. So we have to correct that. And the very CARICOM Treaty does call for special and differential treatment, for special consideration be given to the LDCs. And clearly this is one area in which we have asked for special carve-out in order to satisfy the human resource development requirements of the people of the OECS sub-region.
Good day, Prime Ministers, Premier, and Director General. My question is in regards to the diplomatic relations, re-establishing diplomatic relations in Morocco, Ethiopia, I believe, and a joint mission to Canada as well. Particularly, this is first for Prime Minister Brown. What does this mean for Antigua and Barbuda in terms of we will now have an Antiguan for serving as a permanent diplomatic envoy to the African Union, and also a person from Antigua serving in Morocco?
Well, this is a sub-regional initiative, and we have representation at the sub-regional level at other countries. For example, Brussels, I think it's a Dominican who is serving there. What we try to do as far as practicable is to spread these opportunities among the different countries within the OECS. In fact, Antigua was first slated to have the ambassador designate for Morocco. We then switched with St. Kitts, so they will get the position of ambassador, and we take the first officer. And as a consequence, we will now take the position of ambassador to the African Union. But to answer your question specifically, clearly there are career opportunities here for two Antiguans, and I'm quite sure that they could become, regional public servants of repute. It may well set the foundation for them to participate in other organizations, not only within the region, but perhaps extra-regionally. So I think it's a great opportunity, great exposure for those individuals.
My next question is directed to the Director General, and this is more of a general question. For persons who may not, for general public who may not understand what the role of the OECS is or how it benefits them, what do you say to the general public about the OECS? Well, and any of the other prime ministers, if they want, can answer it.
Sure. Put very simply, the work of the OECS Commission is guided by the revised Treaty of Basel that speaks to some very simple objectives: the creation of an economic union. With an economic union, we are talking about the free movement of people, goods, services, and capital. Now, if you think about it, what that breaks down to is that and these are now embedded in our strategic priorities for the triennium to actually achieve and reach certain delivery points on that journey. One, it means that every OECS citizen has a right to move, to travel from country to country for work, leisure, or business, or take-up residence without any impediments with their family. As you can imagine, as simple as that sounds, there are all sorts of complications because, for example, if I travel to come to live in Antigua, what happens to my family? My family should have the right to move as well. My children should have the right to attend schools. my children should pay the same school fees as Antiguans are paying if school fees are applicable. And that goes for across the board. In terms of business, the right of establishment, the future we are looking at is if I establish a business in Grenada, by the act of incorporation in Grenada, that business should automatically be an OECS business, which means that I don't have to now go to establish a business in St. Kitts, in Anguilla, in the BVI. The fact that it is registered in one space, it can do business across the entire space. Then simple things like customs issues and so on. If I'm operating a business from Grenada and I import my goods into Grenada and now have to distribute it across the OECS, I should not then have to pay duties, multiple duties at every location. So wherever the point of entry is where the duties will be paid, and then we allow for the free flow of goods. So it boils down to very practical, meaningful improvements in the lives of people. There are a lot of, especially for young people, I must say, because, and that's something we are now working with our education development unit and our regional integration unit to develop a package for schools that would involve a lot of smartphone media, because that's where all the studies show most young people, the main means of communicating with them is through this. So we're going to have a lot of videos and so on explaining regional integration and showing the opportunities. Entrepreneurship is a huge opportunity across the OECS. We have, within the Economic Union, there's already an OECS stock exchange. Now that's practically dead, frankly. But there are huge opportunities in there. We're saying when we get Liat back on his feet and sorted out and restructured and so on, there are opportunities in there. That stock market should be a vehicle for what Prime Minister Brown calls entrepreneurial empowerment, where a cleaner in this hotel should be able to buy shares in Liat through a mutual fund that is part of their credit union, for example. So we need that culture of shareholding where citizens of the OECS can become owners of the OECS and participate in its growth and development. So there are huge opportunities in the regional integration. In Antigua, Antigua is a center of specialization for healthcare. You have the oncology center here in St. John's. Again, OECS citizens being able to travel to Antigua for medical care. Some of it is happening now. Then if there are more sophisticated cases of care being required, we have been developing relations with Guadeloupe and Martinique for care. So that kind of seamlessness of travel, of work, of opportunity is what we seek to open through this union. And there's strength in numbers because separately we can easily be broken. Together we are a real force to reckon with. And that is shown, for example, in the achievement of St. Vincent and the Grenadines in achieving a seat on the UN Security Council. I don't know if you heard yesterday at the Assembly, Prime Minister Chasney indicated that St. Lucia is going to provide funds to St. Vincent, provide a grant to support the expansion of the staffing of that office so that they can adequately rise to the challenge. St. Vincent wins, the entire OECS wins. All of the governments are now minded to provide whatever support is required to St. Vincent. So we all stand behind each other. Don't mind the occasional issues. Every family has its dispute, but at the end of the day, I can assure you, all the prime ministers line up behind each other.
Absolutely. Solidarity. And I want to endorse your sentiments about ownership, both at the national and regional levels. Well, I guess we one more question and then we wrap up. Go on.
You want to do it?
One more two? Okay. That makes it two?
Okay. That's a two-part quick last question, Prime Minister Brown. The pretty much just coming off what Dr. Jules had mentioned about St. Vincent and the Grenadines to be assisted by St. Lucia in relation to a financial contribution to assist it in its efforts on the UN Security Council. Was that discussed? Any further contributions possibly from any other member states?
I'm absolutely sure that all of us will assist.
Okay, perfect. And final question on the matter of foreign policy. So while there has been a move towards the diplomatic mission in Morocco, that's well on the way towards Ottawa and the African Union. What of the question of Cuba and Venezuela? Because that has caused a split in the OECS where, for example, St. Lucia has taken a decidedly different position on the issue. Was that discussed, especially on the matter of Venezuela?
No, the issue of our with Venezuela and Cuba was not on the agenda. I'm not too sure that Prime Minister Chastany is necessarily at odds with our position. I know he did attend a controversial meeting, but so far he has not said anything definitively to suggest that he's in support of any form of intervention by the U.S. I think that is the ultimate test as to whether or not any country within the OECS or within CARICOM, for that matter, supports the U.S., because that is the ultimate objective, to intervene. And so far, I'm of the view that Prime Minister Chastany has indicated that he's against intervention.
Prime Minister Brown, you indicated that, well, you didn't indicate. It has been indicated that you've been elected to lead a group that will lead the charge with regard to de-risking and within the OECS and, of course, CARICOM. Right. Question is, what will you do in the first steps of this charge? What will be some of the areas you're going to tackle immediately to bring some sort of resolution to what we see as de-risking, corresponding banking, and the like? Yeah,
well, this is not a new issue. In fact, CARICOM had actually nominated me to lead this issue probably about 2.5 years ago. And I recall one of the first things we did, we had a stakeholder conference in which we had a number of individuals. In fact, we had the deputy director of the IMF present at that meeting, and a number of bankers, central bankers, regulators who attended that meeting. We have decided that advocacy is very important for this issue. I think in many instances, some of the policymakers really do not understand the issue. In some instances, it could well be unintended consequences of their actions in which they are trying to address the issues of tax transparency, money laundering, and terrorism financing, putting these systems in place to curb against those ills, but at the same time creating these unintended consequences for countries within the Caribbean. It means, therefore, that going forward we have to continue and even increase the level of advocacy. In fact, based on the discussions that we held yesterday in the OECS Parliament, what we intend to do, or the OECS Assembly, we intend to write formally to a number of stakeholders, to include those who operate corresponding banks, regulators, and to bring to their attention that this matter has been ventilated at the level of the OECS Assembly, that there's a full commitment of all member states within the OECS sub-region to cooperate with their international obligations. And we have the empirical evidence to confirm that all of the countries have been found to be largely compliant. So for them to list us as uncooperative jurisdictions clearly is an erroneous label. Even this idea, too, that they consider us to be tax havens, that is not so either. In fact, I'm in the process of getting empirical evidence from the Inland Revenue Department to confirm that we do not have any significant amount of European deposits in our banks. We know, for example, that we have a total of about 1.2 billion United States dollars in deposits in our offshore banks. And between two banks that are not domiciled neither within the US nor the European Union, or even Canada for that matter, those two banks account for about 1.1 billion of the 1.2 billion. And we're pretty sure that the remaining 100 million US dollars would result in a situation in which we probably may not even have as much as 10 million euros in deposits. So this idea that they're looking to the OECS sub-region to unearth these deposits so that they can increase their tax yield, it is really an exercise in futility. But for some reason, at the back of their minds, they believe that within the OECS we have billions of dollars stashed away, maybe trillions of dollars, which they reckon would have been as a result of tax evasion and tax avoidance. So we have to step up the level of advocacy. We also have to do necessary research so that we can speak with empirical evidence. And as I indicated to you, we have started the process here. It would be helpful if other countries could do similar research and to share the information so that we can say to them, you know, without any fear of contradiction, that they're looking within the wrong region. We don't have their money. So thank you very much. Pleasure.
Oh, lastly, PM, I just wanted to note that today, the 18th of June, is OECS Day. So it's time to celebrate our accomplishments and to wish all citizens of member states of the OECS happy OECS Day.
Happy OECS Day.